It was supposed to be a fresh start, a quiet trip to help me and my little boy heal from the past, 3 long years after the day we bury my husband. The man who meant the world to us, the one whose death shattered everything I believed in, and whose absence left a silence so loud it echoed through every corner of our home. And I thought maybe this trip would give us something new, a small reset, a few smiles, some peace. Because I had spent 3 years trying to glue the broken pieces of my life back together while raising our son alone, answering his questions about death, telling bedtime stories filled with lies just to give him comfort, saying, "Daddy's watching from the stars," when deep down, I wished he was. But that one flight, the one I thought would be just a break from routine, turned out to be the moment everything unraveled. The second I looked into the past I thought was buried, and realized I had been living in a nightmare painted like a memory, because mid-flight, while the plane hummed gently in the background and I was sipping my coffee with tired hands, my son suddenly dropped his juice box, pulled on my sleeve, and whispered with wide, trembling eyes, "Mom, that's Dad with another woman." And time stopped, the world spun, and everything inside me froze, because those words weren't just innocent. They were lightning striking the heart of everything I thought was true. So I turned slowly, painfully, not knowing if I was about to crush my son's hopes or shatter my own reality. And when I saw the man across the aisle, smiling, laughing, alive, it felt like grief came back from the dead and stabbed me all over again, because he looked exactly like my husband, down to the scar above his eyebrow, the way he touched his chin while thinking, even the sound of his voice when he leaned in to whisper to the woman beside him. And I couldn't breathe, couldn't understand how this was possible, because I buried him. I held his hand when he took his last breath. I watched the coffin lowered into the ground, and yet, here he was, alive and warm, not a ghost, not a dream, but real, sitting just a few feet away like he'd never left, like he hadn't torn our lives apart and left a child crying for years into his pillow. And I didn't want it to be true. I didn't want my heart to be ripped open again. But my son looked up at me with such honesty, such certainty, that I knew this wasn't a child's imagination. He saw what I saw, and it hurt more than I could explain. So I stood up, legs weak, hands shaking, and walked toward the man who once said he loved me more than anything in the world. And when our eyes met, everything changed, because in that moment, he knew I knew, and I saw it. The fear, the guilt, the recognition he couldn't hide, and he looked away like a coward, like a man cornered by his past, and I asked one word, just one. "Why?" But the woman beside him turned, confused, asking if everything was all right, and I said something no one ever expects to say on a plane. "That's my husband, the one I buried 3 years ago." And gasps filled the air. The aisle went silent, and the woman's face turned pale, looking at him like he was a monster she never saw coming. And he opened his mouth, tried to speak, but nothing came out, just silence, just shame. And I stepped back, because I didn't want answers, not yet. I wanted to breathe, to think, to scream, to wake up from this sick, twisted dream. And the flight attendant came by, asking if everything was okay. But nothing was okay, because how do you explain that your dead husband faked his death, built a new life, and left you to raise a child in agony while he played house with someone else? And the worst part, my son, my sweet, innocent boy, kept asking, "Why didn't he say hi to me, Mom? Doesn't he love me anymore?" And I couldn't answer that. I couldn't tell him the truth, not yet, because how do you explain betrayal so deep it feels like drowning in your own memories? And when we landed, I followed them, not to fight, but to confront, to demand the truth. And he finally broke, told me everything, how he felt trapped, overwhelmed, wanted a new life, wanted freedom. And so he staged it all, the sickness, the hospital stay, the sudden collapse, even got help from someone to fake the death certificate. And while I grieved, he vanished, moved across the country, met someone new, started over like we were nothing but a chapter he didn't want to finish. And I stood there, numb, listening to the man I once loved talk like our life was just a mistake. And I wanted to scream, to rip apart everything he said, but I held it together for my son, who stood quietly, confused and heartbroken, trying to understand why his father was alive but chose to disappear. And I knelt beside him, held him tight, and said something I never thought I'd say. He made his choice, baby, and now we make ours. Because in that moment, I realized we didn't need him anymore. We never did, because real love doesn't leave you in the dark. Real fathers don't let their sons grow up without answers, and real men don't run away from the family they promised to protect. And that day, I walked away, not broken, but stronger, not shattered, but awake, because the truth, as painful as it was, set us free. And if you've ever been abandoned, lied to, left behind by someone who swore they'd never leave, remember this. It's not your fault. Their cowardice is not your burden to carry. Their silence is not your shame. And the story doesn't end with their betrayal. It begins with your healing, and maybe, just maybe, this pain was the push you needed to build something real, something better. And if this story touched you, if it reminded you that even the worst moments can become turning points, then don't scroll away. Take a second, breathe in, and let yourself feel every word, because you are not alone, and your strength is more powerful than any lie. And I want you to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear the truth, and hit that subscribe button, because every week we tell real stories like this. Stories that make you feel, stories that remind you of your worth, your resilience, your ability to rise no matter how many times life knocks you down. And I promise you, this channel isn't just about stories. It's about healing, hope, and helping people find their voice again. So stick with us, because your story matters, your pain has purpose, and your healing begins right here.